Hello, everyone. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast, where we dive into the journeys of remarkable entrepreneurs shaping our world. I'm your host, Kalika, and today we're honored to have Gabriella Santaniello, CEO of A-Line Partners, as our guest. As CEO of A-Line Partners, Gabriella brings a wealth of experience in retail, market research, and investment to the table. With a background spanning sales strategy at renowned brands like Ralph Lauren and Nautica, as well as roles at major retailers such as Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom, Gabriella's leadership is rooted in deep industry knowledge. Prior to her role as CEO, Gabriella served as an independent consultant specializing in brand, distribution, and wholesale sales strategy for department stores and specialty chain retailers. Join us as we uncover the insights and expertise that have propelled Gabriella to the helm of A-Line Partners, shaping the land of retail. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast, Gabriella.
Thank you, Kalika. Nice to be here.
So you've been doing this for 10 years and you really are the secret weapon behind a lot of the retail landscape changes. Tell us a little bit about what you do and why it's so special.
Okay, so what I do is I'm actually what's considered an independent research provider. And I have a team of people around the country who go to the malls. We gather data. I've been doing this for 10 years on my own, but also prior to that, 6 years at a brokerage firm. And we collect the data and we do a download, and I have reports that go out to institutional investors and then also retailers. And so they can take a look at, just catching inflections in the business, the various nuances in retail, what to look out for. For investors specifically, it's sort of how that rolls up into earnings, whether or not they're going to, miss or make their earnings. And then for retailers, it's really just taking a look at the environment and understanding, competitively what's going on, culturally what's going on, and so that they can better plan products, product launches, shifts in even like their store locations, marketing strategies. So it's a long list.
So you help CEOs to be on the ground floor, to really get a pulse of what's happening. Why is that important today?
Well, it's really interesting because you would think that with everything today where it's like online and we have social media and everyone just, online shopping so big, there's still a huge importance in bricks and mortar and just really understanding, you know, what the consumer is doing. It's really interesting because after COVID, there was sort of this like renewed interest in going to the mall, and people wanted that like just to be a part of just like every day, the traffic flow, part of a community, going to the mall with your friends. And malls became this destination where people would go and they would shop and see movies, and they could spend like the entire day there. So it's really interesting. We see a lot of these retailers where people shop online and then maybe they abandon a cart, or they just kind of, they keep it there and then they will go to the store and they'll take a look, and they call that showrooming. But you can get a really good read as to what the customers want. And the other thing is, aside from that, with the companies, and as that rolls up into earnings, is a lot of times, someone on Wall Street will look at the financials and they're deep in the financials and they sort of have that understanding. They also get credit card data, but they look to me to fill in, maybe people are spending more cash. Things aren't showing up in the credit card data. A lot of time companies will launch products and maybe the launch is successful, but maybe it's a miss. These things don't show up until the companies actually report earnings. So they look to me to sort of fill in that gap. And just one little analogy, like in sports, where they have someone who does the technical analysis, the statistics, and then someone who does the color commentary and sort of fills in. That's what I do. I always say that I'm like a color commentator.
It's because you know the business inside and out. Like you wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
able to be reflecting on what's happening if you didn't
Right.
have that deep industry knowledge.
Correct. So I started my career in the fashion industry, and I've done all different roles. I mean, I worked on the floor, I worked in wholesale where I managed, I was managing Macy's when Macy's was not just one big company. There was like Macy's West out to Guam. I managed duty free. So I did that in the fashion industry. And then I think I can say that I think I've been to every mall in the United States. I've always, used to do all store tours and to see the product. And so I've been out there. I think I've been in a mall every week since, I don't know, probably since the start of my career. And then also now just following all the retailers that I follow. I mean, it's multiple times a week that I'm out there, and then the people who work for me as well. So it's constant data flow.
I mean, it sounds like a dream job. I mean, you tell us a little bit about your educational experience. How did you get this job today?
Interesting. So my education was I majored in Italian at Georgetown University. I was always interested in other cultures and other languages, and so I loved studying languages. So I majored in Italian, minored in French, and then minored in economics. And then I always knew I wanted to be in the fashion industry. I actually started off in it wasn't even fashion. I mean, I was like a marketing assistant at a dental company. And then I went into the fashion industry and got on the side of, all the sales and the wholesale side of it. And I was working for Ralph Lauren Children's Wear. I was based in San Francisco. And for personal reasons, I had to quit and move down to Los Angeles. And so I moved to Los Angeles and I was consulting. I had a friend who knew someone at a denim company. And so I was working for them. And then I had the same friend actually worked at this brokerage firm, Wedbush Securities. And he kept saying, and Wedbush was known for its consumer team. And he kept saying, we want to send a bunch of college students to the mall to like gather data for us. And I'm like, no, there's a better way to do it. He's like, we just want to give them like American Express cards and they can just go around the country and like send the data. And I'm like, well, how are you going to, what are you going to do with the data once you get it? And how are you going to use it? And so it was, yeah, it was actually kind of funny. So we talked about we used to meet every Wednesday at this sushi restaurant for dinner, and they had like, I don't know, half price sushi something. So we used to meet, and then finally one day after 3 months he comes in and he's like, I gave my boss your number, he's going to call you. So they called me and I went in and I actually pitched a whole consulting project and something I could do for them. But since they're brokerage firm, they needed me to be full time and they needed me to get my licenses so that I could give them the information and then also talk to their clients, which are the hedge funds and the mutual funds that are now my clients today. So
I mean, isn't that fantastic that you're taking someone who had a language background, someone with economics, and you turn this into a career that you actually really, really love? You really love
mhm,
it.
I do. I do.
Yeah. You love
Love it.
shopping. I mean, and all the clothes that you wear, I mean, like you were just always spot on. Tell us, so tell us about that Australian brand. We were having conversation about this
We
one
were.
Australian brand that you love,
Yep.
and you had so many insights about
hmm
that brand. Tell
hmm
us a little bit about that.
Okay. So it was 2017. I was, on LinkedIn, and the CEO of this Australian brand called Camilla reached out to me and she said, listen, we're looking to launch in the United States. We want to find store locations. And then they were also seeking funding at the time. And so I had a Zoom, and then she said, we're actually going to be in the United States in January. So this was like November-ish. We're going to be in the United States in January, and this week we're going to be in New York. And they didn't really have plans to go anywhere else. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, as luck would have it, I'm going to be in New York too. So, which I wasn't, but I was like, whatever. Booked a flight, went out, met with them, and then they said, actually, we extended our trip. So we want to now, while we're here, take a look at different locations where we are going to launch our stores. So they said, we're also going to be in Los Angeles. So the following week, I met them on like a Thursday. They said, the following week, we're going to be in Los Angeles. Is there any way you can set up some meetings for us to meet with some investors? And I said, okay, sure. Again, got out of that meeting and I was like scrambling, calling, finding as many people as I could. Can we just set up some investor meetings? So I set up a meeting. It was a good meeting. They had also made some contacts as well. And then after that I would sort of hand off to these are like investment bankers and But then we really sat down and talked about where their store locations would be. And the two that came to mind, Los Angeles area, but Orange County particularly, and then also Miami. And they also had all their data based on where their online sales were. And that all sort of matched up. And then we were discussing the different locations in the different malls. And one of those malls now is, I think, the top performing store in the entire company. And then the one in Orange County, they launched at a mall called South Coast Plaza. And then that also is one of their very successful stores in the United States. And then now they're looking to expand to additional locations. Since then, I think the funding in the United States was a little bit different from the way it happens in Australia. So they ended up not pursuing that avenue, and they ended up finding funding and partnering with a private equity firm in Australia. So now they're in a great growth mode, and the brand was featured on the White Lotus, and she's had a lot of success since then. And it's one of my favorite brands still to this day. I mean, I'm a convert. I have a lot of clothes, so I visit the store all the time in South Coast Plaza. So it's great.
But weren't you also saying that they're thinking about these locations and you have like opinions on them?
Oh yeah, yes. They're going to see this and be like, huh, yes, it's true. So, I go to the store frequently because it's a mall that I visit all the time. So I always pop in, and every week she releases new prints. And so I always want to see what's going on. And so I was talking to some associates, and they had some associates in from Florida, and they were talking about these new locations that they were going to launch. And I don't know, I don't necessarily think they're the right locations for them. I understand what they're doing, and I think that they're looking at like, okay, our online sales are here, but just really understanding the mall. And it's like, okay, when I was talking to them, if that's what you're going to commit to, and you're going to be in that mall, from a location standpoint, it's also not like the most ideal location within that mall. If you look at the mall, the anchors and the traffic and flow, and it's sort of in a dead wing of the mall. So, I mean, at this point, I think they're moving forward with it, but in the whole process of them launching in the United States, they launched in Florida and they launched in Southern California, and then they also opened a store in Texas that they ended up closing because it didn't perform well. So it seems like,
And you knew it.
and I knew it. So this is actually an area that I'm really passionate about, which is helping brands, these mid-size international brands, understand the US market and understand where best to launch, a retail store or a pop-up, because location matters. And it's not only looking at your online sales and understanding like, okay, we're in this market, we're going to be there, because even though your online sales are from that region or that area, that customer might not shop at the local mall. I mean, you have to understand where that customer is going. And a big, like, to just reference Southern California, if you're looking at, that customer in Calabasas, like, are they really going to the Topanga Mall? No, more than likely they're going to Century City, or they're even heading to Beverly Hills. So,
Because
I
it's a
don't.
more wealthy
Correct.
clientele, right?
Correct.
Hmm.
Correct. They are wealthy themselves, Calabasas and that area. They may pop into Topanga to do, whatever. I don't know. You need hosiery or you need something quickly and you're popping in. But in terms of like, making a trip and doing the bulk of your shopping, that customer wants to be down in the thick of it. They either want to be in Beverly Hills where, it's a wealthy customer, or, even Century City. I mean, it's a great mall and you can spend a lot of time there. So
Because
they're
it's an
more,
experience.
it is an
The
experience.
restaurants are the ones that they go to. And
Correct.
so it's not just geographic location.
No.
Of course, they can go to a Target or whatever. Like,
Yep.
they don't want that. It's part of the experience. And you know
Yes.
that because you know the customer.
And you hit the nail on the head, because if you're going to, what we are finding in general, and this is not only this case, this is what we find in general, because, everybody's talking about, oh, but the internet and online and like the death of the American mall and all of that. Yes, true. But, at one point you have to think the only way for these companies to grow was to open a store. So that's why there's so many of these like mid-level, lower tiered malls that don't really need to exist anymore, because people want the experience and they are willing to travel, and they are willing to travel to a mall where they're going to get the experience of a movie theater. Southern California, if there's a Din Tai Fung, that's a big one. In Italy, like, people want these great restaurants, they want movie theaters, and they want to spend the day there. They don't want to just, they're not going to spend a lot of time in a mall that's just local and doesn't have that.
And I also noticed, Rod, my husband, was talking about all these restaurants that are closing, the Red Lobster,
Mm-hmm,
IHOP, all
mm-hmm,
over. And it's,
mm-hmm,
these companies who are so entrenched, who are, $100 million companies plus, and they're closing because they don't really have that pulse of what people want anymore.
mm-mm.
Like, look at all the
Cracker
Pizza
Barrel.
Huts.
Yeah.
What?
Cracker Barrel. Did you
Yeah,
see the CEO just like mention something where she's like, well, we're kind of out of date. Like, they haven't made any updates on it. It's sort of like this like old school country home decor, and they haven't done anything to it in years. Yeah.
like Marie
Yeah.
Calendar. And I
Same.
know that you
Yep.
do like retail, but I mean your insights also goes to these companies as well too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost just like, yeah, duh, we don't go there anymore. We don't go
Yep.
to TGIF, but those were like the hot brands a long time ago,
Yep.
and they didn't evolve.
Yep. Yep.
And so
Yeah.
if there's a retail, you know, company that's listening, what type of advice would you give them in 2024 of how retail is changing? What's important for them to think about?
I think right now it's less having multiple points of presence. It, it's more having one where you just, you never say you want to put all your eggs in one basket, but in this case, it's like you really want to focus on that location, and you want to do everything. It's better to do one correctly from, experienced staff, well-trained staff, as far as like the product layout, availability of product. Because one other thing that happened was that I see a lot is that a lot of retailers went like, how I mentioned like the showrooming, how people go and they take a look at something and then they decide, okay, we're going to buy it online. Retailers, in an effort to like pull back on inventory because they don't want to be in an inventory situation, have pulled back so much that you sometimes it's like it's worthless to go to the store because you're like, I'm not going to find it anyway. They're going to have to do like an online order and place it. So they moved in the opposite direction, and it's like, you got to come back a little, and you have to have some availability, because if people are going to make that trip and they're going to go to an A plus mall and spend 40 minutes in the car, 45 minutes, there needs to be availability of product. You can't get there and just be like, oh, you don't carry it, so
It better be there.
it better be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I,
it's a
I
fine line. It's a balance.
I remember there was those little Uggs that my daughter wanted, and I took the trip to Nordstrom's, and of course it wasn't there, and it's been sold out for 6 months. And I'm thinking, like, gosh, in this day and age where everyone has so much data, how do they do that? Or is that also part of their strategy to be sold out?
In their case, there is a bit of a scarcity model, we call it. So there's definitely a scarcity model with them. And they don't want, because they are seen as a premium brand, they don't want to flood the market with product. And so, yeah, I mean, there's all these little things, these little nuances, for depending on the brand. So that works for them. At some point, at some point, if it wasn't such a hot brand, I mean, it would backfire spectacularly. So it's up to them to like really be on it and to make sure that they do have enough, and then they're doing enough where they can say, like, over the holidays, a lot of times, like in November, you'll see like, oh, I want the Tasman, right? Everybody wanted that Tasman slipper. At one point they were like just telling you it was back ordered and when it was going to come in. So people would do pre-orders, and then when they would gift someone like a card, like it's coming in January. And so there was a lot of that. And so people felt like, oh my God, they got their hands on it. So there is a fine line, and it depends on the brand, but you know, UGG is in the unique position.
I remember, we have a branding agency. We were working with Gray Mullen, and I remember he just
Mm-hmm.
in one of the meetings, he would just be like, "Okay, everyone, sold out." Like
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah,
would just
yeah,
say, "Limited edition, done," and he would just like talk to his team, and
yeah,
that was
yeah.
it. Even though it was a digital print, he was like,
Right.
"Done." Done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that led to the
Yeah.
scarcity as well too.
That's the scarcity. And then you can keep your price points. And so, yes, yes, there are some brands where that's great. But even UGG though, like they had a bunch of retail stores that they closed. And then what they did over the holidays was they moved back into, it was kind of funny. They moved back into some of their old retail locations as just a pop-up for the holidays. So they had like a point of presence and they could have inventory and people could have the experience and actually, see what they were buying, whether or not they had, the full size runs. Because I remember talking to them and they were saying that they were selling out of a lot of it. But also they felt the need, like even though they have this scarcity model, like we do need a bricks and mortar presence. Like we can't just, so economically for them to have a store all year round, it didn't make sense. But over the holidays, it certainly did. Because I think like fourth quarter is their strongest quarter with gift giving and then just the nature of the product for creating warmth and all of that. So
I know there's so many stories with like retail, like even the story of, is it Brandy Melville? Like my daughter,
oh,
yeah, like that
oh God.
documentary about Brandy Melville.
Randy Helville.
Is that
Yeah,
right? Like
that's what it was
it's
called.
almost just, every single retail company has this culture. And I mean,
Uh-huh.
they could not keep everything in stock. All the teenage girls were
Yep.
crazy about this brand.
I
And it
know.
was it was and it was a guy that was behind it. Isn't that
I
interesting?
know. I know. It was a guy behind it, and they just like sort of created this like story. Like Brandy met Melville, and the whole it was just this like they just created a story behind it and opened up this store and it just that thing just caught on like wildfire. I remember going to one of the stores, like it was a store opening down in Orange County at the Irvine Spectrum. And there was a line, and these girls were waiting online for hours. And I was like, do you realize that you could get in the car and go to Fashion Island and that store's been open? And what's Fashion Island? Like 5 miles away from the Irvine Spectrum. I was like, it's not even that far. But it was just so funny that like they're willing to wait for hours on end for this new store opening that didn't have any different product than like the one that was like just down the road. It's very strange. So yeah,
Yeah, it
some
was it
marketing
was just like
geniuses.
like they were in, like they
Hmm.
felt like this is my brand and
Yep.
I'm going to show my support. Like it's
Yep.
almost just like
Yeah.
a football team,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is.
yeah.
It
That's
is.
so crazy. And
Yeah.
they're I mean, there's so many different strategies. Like, do you also help that, clients, let's say like Brandy Melville, to come up with ideas like one size fits all. Like that was interesting.
I know. I know. I know. You definitely take a chance when you do that, but I can tell you it's great for margins because you don't have to have the different specs and you don't have to produce the different size runs. And so, well, that's like a whole, but yeah, I mean, I talk about that all the time. Some brands create their own sizing. We've had, I don't know, Chico's is one. That was like the first, I think. Chico's and then like James Purse, he had like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, just went up to 4. Zimmerman is another brand where they have their own sizing. So yeah, I mean, I think it's more accepted now. I think the customer is more willing to say like, okay, there's special sizing. Because before, I remember when Chico's was really the only one in the market with the sizing, that there was a lot of explaining. They had to explain a lot to customers. And I think now it's a little bit more accepted and out there in the market. There are a few more brands that do the same with sizing. But yeah, you have to take that into consideration if your customer's even going to be open to it.
Right. And
Hmm.
you can get a lot of flack, because a lot of people are like, one
Hmm.
size fit all. Like it's really you can't,
Oh, well,
like,
that's,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yes. Especially now where
Yeah.
everything is, there's more of a focus on diversity and inclusion, and it truly is not one size fits all. So typically they say like one size fits most, but there are stores that, yeah, they will get flack because not everybody can fit into their clothes. But I don't know. On that subject, I have to say though, like that was like Abercrombie back in the day, 10, 15 years ago when everyone was like, not everybody can fit into Abercrombie. And I remember the CEO came out and he was like, well, I mean, you know, you can't, I think you have to create your lifestyle and I think they're different, different retailers do it differently. And the one actually that I like the most where it was Lululemon, which when they launched their extended sizes, and they didn't like make a big announcement. It wasn't like this big thing, like all of a sudden we're diverse and we're inclusive. It was just like, it just showed up one day and it was just on their website. And I was like, that's how you do it. You don't, because if you draw attention to it, all eyes are on you and you're guaranteed to fail no matter what you do. So I think Lulu did a great job with that.
What type of products do you think will succeed in 2024 and beyond?
It's interesting. So right now we have people are becoming a lot more price conscious. You also factor into that uncertainty around an election, which election years are always very interesting for retail. People usually pull back on their spending because there's a lot of uncertainty around, whoever's elected and kind of what their policies are and what the future is going to look like for the consumer. And so we're seeing a lot of people, they're price conscious, they're seeking value, and people are trading down as well. There's a lot of strength at off price right now. Like a lot of people going to TJ Maxx, even like a Burlington and a Ross, Nordstrom Rack. Like a lot of people are mixing as well. Like, if there's something you have to have, maybe you spend the money on that. And then in other areas, like, I don't know, if you have to have like a certain pair of jeans that fit you, and everybody knows how much it's hard to find great jeans. So you find great jeans and those are expensive. If you're going to buy a top or a blazer or something, maybe that's where you're going to off price. So there's a lot of mixing. We even see it. Ulta just reported earnings this morning, and they were talking about prestige cosmetics. It's really a soft category. And so what that is people are maybe buying, you find a great foundation and you don't want to change. So you buy your foundation, but then, so maybe you're buying, I don't know, Charlotte Tilbury foundation, but then you're going to, NYX or ELF and you're buying your eyeliner. So there's
Which
a
is
lot
lower
of,
cost.
exactly,
Yes,
much
yes.
lower,
Yeah.
significantly lower. So there's a lot of that, like, trade down. But if there's a must have, people are still spending the money there.
Yeah.
So,
So, and you can really just be like what do they call it? Like the crystal ball for
hmm
retailers, because
I
you
love it.
see these trends coming from like years ago because
hmm
of your experience. Like even the fact that you're able to like an Abercrombie like 10 years
hmm
ago, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've
How
seen
it,
it all. Been through all the cycles. I had a conversation with someone this morning about Lululemon, and he's like, all right, take me back. And I'm like, how far back do you want to go? Like, because I can go back. So we've definitely seen all these companies through many different cycles. So,
what keeps a company relevant to consumers today?
well, you have to evolve. You can't ignore what's going on culturally. And so I think, whether you agree with it or you disagree with it, you still have to evolve and you have to look at, like, unfortunately, a lot now. Well, okay, hold on. I had my apologies. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I had my so I think with you have to stay relevant in that you have to evolve and you have to have a like I said, whether you agree with it or you disagree with it, you have to look at like the younger generation and what they're dictating. And as much as like, you're in your 40s and your 50s and you may disagree with it, right? It doesn't matter. Like, even though you even have like product that's for an older consumer, yes, you have to take into consideration their concerns, but there still is a lot of influence, especially with social media. There still is a lot of influence that comes from a younger perspective. And like even the use of TikTok, right? It's like I can go on TikTok and I see women who are in their 50s and they're like, oh, I'm 50s and this is 50 style. Well, TikTok was like such a thing that caught on with the younger generation. And then the older generation is like, wait a minute, this is a great tool. I'm going to hop on and do it too. So there is sort of that underlying, like, the younger consumer and what they want. And sort of, you can see where culturally where things are going. And so we saw that with body positivity, inclusion. So, we've seen that coming. And then I think also, an older
consumer may have younger children or grandchildren. And so, they're exposed to it as well, and in adopting that. So I think you have to look to culturally what's going on with the kids in high school and even younger.
I know. So my daughter is trying to find this digital camera because I know even though she can take photos with her iPhone 15, which is 4K, she wants the experience of a digital camera. And so she bought one at Amazon. And then later on, she was going to return it. And she was like, Mom, can I buy something on TikTok Shop? And she doesn't have a TikTok Shop account. And so I thought that that was really interesting because this is the first time she was asking me, because usually she already has like my Amazon account, but she's buying it now directly from TikTok. And I bought so many things from TikTok. Like they
Interesting.
have that hashtag tag that says TikTok made me buy it. Like I can't tell you,
Mhm.
like all, and because it's so cheap, like she said the camera was like $15, and these little things like these brush cleaners that I just buy like on a whim, which are like $5 or $8, like I don't even bother returning it, even though it's like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then I'm taking advice from these people who have like literally I don't even know who they are, but they're so
No,
passionate about it. So
I know.
influencers really work, or
They
regular
do.
people really work?
They do. They do. I mean, you know what the crazy thing is with the influencers too is look at like Alex Earl. Like she has a lot of obviously a lot of influence, but you also look at like the like I have 16-year-old twin nieces. Alex Earl now is too big for them. Like they like her, but she's reached a point where everybody likes her. And so they're sort of like, okay, like she's great and we can see what she wears and everything else, but she's reached that like status that like she's like
Pop,
superstar. Yeah,
right?
I mean,
She's
she
no
just
longer cool. Like she's like mass,
correct. Yeah.
right?
And people are like, I remember my niece was like, I started following her when she only had like 40,000 followers. But then when they get to mass, then then now they're on to like the next influencers and I think also like with these influencers, it's like it got so I don't know what the word is like fake plastic with like some of like the unrealistic, beauty standards and what was out there with, and the Kardashians have been a huge influence in this whole like movement and this new beauty aesthetic. And I think now it's still popular, but we're starting to see other like Alex Earl, the reason my nieces loved her is because she struggled with acne and she would be on social media and she'd be like, look, like I have, like she was really real and her room was a mess. And like everybody was like, oh, I can relate. So we're starting to see a little bit more of that, I think, creep back into social media where we're getting away from like the filters and the plastic and everybody's now if you're real, that's what everybody wants to see. So,
One of my friends is the CEO of Banish, and she
mm-hmm,
also started at her college room, with cystic acne, showing her,
mm-hmm,
her acne, showing her blackheads. She has 75 million views, and she's also an EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization,
uh-huh,
and she
wow,
started Banish because of that, because of her cystic acne. And you know
yeah,
what she told me? She said that she really just targets like real people, and so that's why she does not
yep,
have models on her website,
right, yeah,
because she knows
yeah,
knows who they want. And now that you're mentioning Alex, like, so she was doing this, and now she's, in her 30s. There's
correct.
always a new crop of people,
Always,
right? Like the
always.
16-year-old is going to go to Alex, the 20-year-old will go to Banish, right? Like
Yep,
you still need
yep,
these new crop. And she also told me
exactly.
that she follows, for her trends, she follows 12-year-olds
Yeah,
because it's right. So
yep.
it's the 12-year-olds, even
Hmm.
before they jump into high school, that
Yeah.
really have a pulse of what's happening.
Well, you know what the interesting thing is that the tween market has gone away. 12-year-olds used to be the tween market. Like a tween market was like 9 to 12-year-olds, where, that she's a young girl and she's cute and she's the toddler and she's wearing what her mom wants. And then at 9, she starts to get an opinion as to about what she wants to wear. And so we always had this like tween market. But now with social media and these influencers, it's like the teen market's completely gone away. Like you can even look 9, 10-year-olds, like they want to be the girl who's in high school, who's in college. Like those are the girls that they're following on social media if they're on social media. But yeah, it's crazy. It's younger and younger.
Is retail taking advantage of AI in any way? I'm sure they are, but how?
They are in just, we're not there yet, but they are in terms of like, putting outfits together and like selection on the websites. But we are in like the very beginning stages of all of this. So we will see how they implement it going forward. But a lot of it is like, I don't know if you want to plan a wardrobe for a vacation and they can put that together for you, or even like planning your wedding and all of that comes together. So you can just put in what your aesthetic is and what you're interested in. So that's what we're seeing now. But I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see, because I think like it's going to be important on the like consumer facing, but even internally, and maybe anticipating trends, and that might help them as well.
Right. Because I know that in the past they've used AI to try and create like a blockbuster movie and it never
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's really important to have that human element because a
Yes.
robot doesn't know how to really analyze it when person's shopping, looking at it, putting it down, but you have
Hmm.
shoppers everywhere that are really just observing.
Hmm.
Take us through
Yes.
like these secret shoppers. Like
Okay,
that's like
sure.
sounds so much fun. Can I like work for you? Like that sounds so,
Sure.
we should just do that just for fun,
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
go in.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, they can't be secret shoppers because of what I do. So because I pass information on to investors, we actually have to tell them what we're doing. But with that said, we're never in a store asking anybody like, what are your sales numbers? Like we never ask that. Everything is always very directional. The other thing is I listen to and read the earnings transcripts. And so I understand like where the companies are in their life cycle. I mean, some are in a turnaround, some are very well established, and what their initiatives are. So I pass that along as well. So we have an understanding as to like, product launches or what they said they were going to do with the stores, or hiring associates, or security now because theft is a big deal. So anyways, so my team, they all live within their regions and they go to the same malls every single week and the same stores. And so they are able to go out and establish a baseline for what they're looking at, because it depends on what region you're in or what store you're in, because there are some stores where they don't do promotional activity, and they're few and far between. But if you're in enough regions, you'll have a few of those pop up, or where they'll test fixture packages, or they test pricing or promotions. So you may have a store that has a lot of clearance, but you're alarmed the first time you go in, but then you've been going for 6 months and they always have a lot of clearance. That's an example. So we go in and we look at the new products. So what's at the front of the store? If a retailer puts a rack of sale at the front of the store, that's always a bad sign. So you look at what's at the front of the store. We look at pricing. Is it in line with what they have through the rest of the stores? For an example, like American Eagle a year ago had a bunch of shorts on the front table and they were all $59.95, which was really expensive for them. And so we thought, someone's going to walk in, look at those prices and say, you're I'm not going to go in further. I don't really want to see what's in the store if that's what the price is. So we look at the product, the pricing on the front table. We look at fashion basics, which are basic styles but in fashion colors, and typically they're on the floor for about 3 to 6 months, and then they clear out of them. So, and those are typically like high margins. You can promote them but still make a lot of money on them. So we look at that. We look at markdowns, so clearance levels, what the actual ticket markdown is, what the promotional activity is. And then we talk to associates and we observe customers as well. So like, where are the customers congregating? Maybe what kind of signage they have, if that's really drawing people in. Sometimes people come in and they'll go straight to a table. Like, why are they going to that table? What's the signage? What's the product? And then we talk to associates, but we tell them like, we work for a research company, and the research goes to people who buy and sell the stocks, and you can either talk to us or not. We're not going to ask you anything really specific. They call it material non-public information. We don't want to pass that information on to investors. And then they can just tell you, customers come in, this is what they look at. We see sell-throughs here, or it's been really tough. The new jean launch, the jeans don't fit. We also try on product as well. So, and then we just gather all that data and they input it into a database. And then I get alerts like all day long. And then after that, I'll take a look at it and use that information. I'm also in the stores, and then I use that information to write my report and pass it along to my clients. So
Do you also go to Europe? Like how they say like a lot of the trends happening,
Yeah.
start at, yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh.
What's that like?
Well, what's really interesting is to go, it's really interesting actually, because it used to only be, it went from Europe to the United States, like it moved west, but now it also moves east. So it comes from Asia and it's coming to it hits California. So it kind of depends where you are. Like, and it's interesting because that has been a shift that's been going on for like, I want to say like probably like 10 plus years, where we started to see more of an influence coming from like Japan isn't a country, Korea, obviously with the rise of like K-pop. I mean, that's been a huge influence on fashion. So, you see it coming from all angles. One thing I noticed was recently in Europe is, I think possibly the skinny jean is going to start coming back. So we're seeing a lot of that. So we're in a wide leg cycle right now. We
Right.
probably have another year plus, but it's coming because we're starting to see it.
So don't invest in wide leg trousers, people, even though it's such the
I know.
rage right now,
I
right?
know. I know.
Yeah. So skinny
So
jeans, huh?
we're going to see the skinny jeans. And the interesting thing with that is that they call it the upside down triangle. So if you think of it as it's skinny jeans on the bottom and then a voluminous top, right? So the top is a lot larger, whereas when you've got the wide leg bottoms, you typically wear a smaller top. So any shift in trend like that is actually really good for retailers, because not only does it drive multiple units because you're buying a bottom and a top, you're also buying a different kind of shoe. So you're buying, you have a much chunkier shoe when you have a wide leg bottom. And then if you have you're wearing skinny jeans, you wear like a smaller shoe, and that drives, like, sneakers are a really big category. So, that's when I think skinny jeans, you're going to see Converse and Vans will make a comeback, and both kind of fallen by the wayside now in favor of like the New Balance, like the chunkier shoe. So, we'll see what happens with that.
Wow, that is so
I
amazing
love it.
because if people follow these trends, then they'll see how it, there's a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If they're not
Yeah.
following it, then they won't expect, and they'll be like, "Oh, I wonder why." Like,
Yeah.
I wonder why my
Yeah.
sales are up, but
Yeah.
you know why,
Well,
right?
what the crazy thing is with retailers also is that I saw this spring that was really, really interesting. So the powers that be that send out, like, here's what the trends are, right? They'll send out color palettes. So everybody knows, like, they've known, the fashion companies have known since last year. Here are the color palettes. And it's really interesting to see what they choose, because this year there were bright color palettes in spring, and then there were like neutrals, like very, very neutral. And all of the companies that chose the colors did well, and the ones that went into a neutral color palette did not. And that happens every now and then, and it's just, I don't know if it's just this is more of our like vibe or our aesthetic and what we want to put out this spring, but you can just get it wrong by choosing the wrong color palette. And so it's tough to be a retailer and to really anticipate that. I mean, you do your best, and I'm sure that they're trying to recover from it. But we've had a few retailers that have done that, and it just has not worked well.
Wow, yeah, and just as you are talking about that, because I see it like, when I'm shopping, like I definitely gravitate towards more of the colorful pop, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what it is, because it's just like
Yeah.
you just want a little bit more energy, or
Yeah.
it's hard
Yeah.
to place that
Right.
intangible need, right? Yeah,
Even in spring, it's like, everybody expects there to be color in spring. And it's even if the weather isn't warm, they still want that. And yeah, you should still have neutrals on the floor, and like you can ease your way in, but you can't all of a sudden, like what we saw with some of them, it was that they launched the season with these pastels, which everybody had, and then they just switched to like olive khaki, and like an acid yellow, and you're just like, wait, what happened? It was like so disjointed, it didn't flow. So you run into issues like that as well.
and I saw another trend too, that everyone's trying to get their color matching, and
Oh
so now they
yes,
know what
yes.
colors they're actually wearing, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a
Right?
big one on TikTok, where they
Right?
show the colors. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And so now they're actually making choices that actually work for them. So for
Correct.
me, like I can't wear white. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
obviously wear it because of your
Mm-hmm.
skin tone. I can wear cream because of
Mm-hmm.
my skin tone. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but then, when you were before, before you knew what your colorway was, like you would try to force yourself in these trends. You don't have to
Correct.
do that anymore.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's so
Exactly.
fascinating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what type of advice would you give to someone who's trying to find something that they're passionate about and make it into a business or a career?
They get into a business. Well, I think the road is always something that I think is like it was very unexpected to me for me how it all just came to be. And to be quite honest with you, I loved being in the fashion industry, but there was always something a little that was like missing for me. And I think most of it is to just like be open to opportunity and to like try to network with people and try to see what other people do, that things that interest you. And even though I loved the fashion, there were certain things I loved about the fashion industry, but also certain things that I didn't. And I was like, okay, well, what would the ideal job be for me? And I really like sat down and I was like, okay, like this is what I like. And what I liked about, getting into finance and working for the brokerage firm, which was a great experience for me. I was there for 6 years, was also just like learning a different business. I mean, it was so different from the fashion industry. And but I was also able to apply the skills that I learned in the fashion industry in finance, and then ultimately was able to just go out on my own. And I think it's taking risk, but calculated risk. And over time, you build experience, and it's, don't discount your experience, because as you know, like you and I have talked, where it's like, you don't realize it. I think you're sort of in the weeds and you kind of don't realize like your strengths and really what you're good at. And then when you really sit down and you think about it, you're like, oh, well, I actually am. What do you know?
Yeah, and you
So,
also have your master's as well too,
I
right?
do.
So,
I
and then
do.
we forget that. We forget that
Yeah,
we're
it's
educated
true.
and
I know.
connected.
I know. I know. I know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. But I think it's just like, it's like sort of like reflecting and understanding where you ultimately want to go and what would be, where your passions lie. But then throughout, throughout the years of your career, it's like really taking the time to like identify it. Cause I think also you can like keep your head down and do your job. And then all of a sudden, 3 years later, you're like, oh, wait a minute. So it's also evolving. I talk about these retailers evolving. It's like you have to evolve as well. And taking risks. You have to take a calculated risk. And you know what? It's like nothing's permanent. You can take a risk, and if it doesn't work, maybe it'll set you off in another direction.
Sometimes I think about it, like sometimes when people are going to take a trip, like, you actually take a look like, okay, where am I going? Am I going to the 405?
Yes.
Am I going to the 110? Like
Hmm.
people don't do that with their life. Like, why not?
No,
Like
I know.
here, if you want to go from here to New York, these are the routes I'm going to take. And if not,
Correct.
I can take this. But we literally just show up and we're like, do, do, and then end up in San
Uh-huh.
Francisco when you want to be in New York without really
Yeah.
planning. So when you talk about these risks, or it also needs some type of reflection,
Yes,
like, where do I
exactly.
actually have to go?
Right. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's got to be calculated. You can't just like do it. I mean, you have to like sit down and plan it out. Nothing ever goes according to plan, but you got to plan to the best of your ability, and then things will work and they won't work. And like I said, I mean, it just sets you off on a different course that might be better for you.
Yeah, what's really interesting about whenever I am with you, you're so busy because all these CEO, all these top companies are always just like
Hmm.
waiting
Hmm.
on your
Hmm.
information, on your analysis, because they need more information in order for them to make a decision,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so it's
Yeah,
almost just like it kind of feels good to be needed, right?
it
Like,
does.
right? Like I'm
It does.
your secret weapon.
I know it does. I have to, the one thing which, I'm looking obviously to evolve and to get into other areas of my company. But the one thing that I do that when I really, really think about it, it's like especially being out on my own, I've managed to build like a really great client base. Like I really like them. They're good people. We work well together. And yes, it is nice that, they like dying to talk to me about, Bath and Body Works, like latest promotion and what that means going forward in June. And sometimes you're just like, really? Is this what I talk about all day? But it's important, ultimately in their process. So
It kind of reminds me of like in high school when you're just
Yeah.
like, what did he say? What did he mean when he said that?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
really trying to
Yeah.
analyze the landscape of like what's really happening, right?
Hmm.
What do they mean by that buy or whatever? Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
this is a global podcast. There's a lot of
Okay.
people from all around the world that are
Yeah.
listening, entrepreneurs, and I know that one of the things that you're looking to do is bringing international brands into the United States. Tell us more about
Yes.
that.
So, as I think I mentioned before, we are in malls across the country. I have been to, I think, every mall in the United States. And we're there frequently, and we have a deep understanding of these malls and their customer base and, where these people come from. And it's not only like these malls issue reports and they have what they call their trading area, the demographics by trading area. And that's great, but there's more to it. And I think it's important to look beyond that and to really have an understanding, as we mentioned, like people traveling to these malls and what malls are, highly trafficked, and then also, areas of the mall, because there are areas where you can end up in a dead wing and then you're going to have no traffic. And then you're going to have to be doing clienteling the whole time, whereas you need some natural traffic that's going through. And I also understand that there's, you're dealing with these mall companies. So if you do end up in a dead wing, what can you do to bring traffic to your store outside of just the usual clienteling? And a lot of that is, you can set up like sometimes they have little displays where you can have, advertising, or like even a mannequin with something, or you could take advantage of different things the mall has to offer that will bring attention to your brand.
So
So
being a lot more creative as well too.
correct. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I
Hmm.
remember when I had my waxing salon and they at Ala Moana wanted us to move
Hmm.
to Ala Moana, and
Hmm.
also same thing. I'm just like, this is a dead wing. Like, why would
Yeah.
I even everyone?
Right.
But the brokers are so aggressive, and
They
so I
are.
think that's one thing too is just because if there's an international brand coming here and they're selling you, saying all the
Yes.
great things, but it may or may
Correct.
not be true. So having a
Exactly.
partner on the ground that understands the
Exactly.
flow, I think really helps. What do you
Yes.
think about that?
Yes. Being a partner and being your advocate in the United States and making sure that you launch correctly, because you only have one opportunity to launch. And so you want to make sure, it's the best it can be. And of course, there is some trial and error to it, because there always is, but you want to just make sure that you're doing your best and launching in the US market. And that goes for American companies launching overseas. I mean, there are many cases where once you do it, and then if you have to correct course, it doesn't necessarily go over so well. So it's it's just setting off on your right foot for your expansion into the United States.
And saving money, right? Now this
Hmm.
other company's
Correct.
closing
Yes,
their Texas
exactly.
store, right?
Yep,
That's a lot of money that could have been avoided if they just chose
exactly.
the correct
Hmm.
mall, right?
Exactly. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Well, how can people find out more about you and your services?
Going to my website, so you can go to alignpartners.com. That is the best way at this point. I am working, and since I am part of the financial community and I am licensed, I am somewhat limited on social media. So for now, it's my website and then my LinkedIn page as well.
Okay, we'll make sure to add that in your show notes.
Perfect.
It is so wonderful to talk to you. I just
Thank you
love
so much.
getting your insights because you just
Yeah.
never know like where these trends are coming from, and
Yeah.
but you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thanks, Gabriella.
All right.